Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about the top 10 worst Dragon Ball Z games that we ever got in English. I'm not going to be talking about any of the Japanese games. I honestly haven't played them, so I also doubt people would be as interested. I'm probably wrong about that. But anyways, I'm going to move along and we'll start talking about it right now. And remember to stay tuned next time when I talk about the top 10 best Dragon Ball Z games in English. So, to kick off our list, we've got Dragon Ball Z, The Legacy of Goku, Part 1. So, the first thing you're going to notice when you start playing the game is the opening cutscene that looks exactly like the Rock the Dragon video from the show, except it doesn't have the right music. And really none of the music in this game is very good. But I remember liking that opening cutscene because it looked, oh my god, it looks like the show. I was a kid. And you know, really, it looks like a pixelated mess now, but back then it seemingly looked pretty decent. But you get to the rest of the game, and it's such a mixed game visually because some of the sprites look pretty decent, but some of the character portraits look bad, and some of the backgrounds look. It's very hard to tell where you can and can't walk. And the game has a flight mechanic, but you can only fly so many steps until you run out. So basically, it's for nothing. The flying is only for when you're in a boss battle and you need to get away and then start spamming the Kamehameha on them over and over again, which is your only real tactic in the whole game. You want to beat anything, you just do that. Yeah, there's punching and kicking, and there's other moves that you can do. But the only one worth anything is the Kamehameha. You go from the beginning of Dragon Ball Z with Raditz up to the end of defeating Frieza on planet Namek. But none of the story in between makes any sense. It's not the story from the anime, it's not the story from the manga. It's got you doing stuff like finding a pterodactyl's eggs or her babies or something like that, and lots of other little things that just doesn't make any sense. The whole game plays like Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, but it's not fun, and it's not really very entertaining either. It doesn't follow the show, and it's just all over the place. That's the reason why it's getting number 10, but it's about to get a lot worse. So Dragon Ball Z Budokai came out, and it was a pretty good game. The combat was a little stiff, but the graphics were pretty good, and it told the story exactly like the show, with the character models being very similar poses to the show and doing exact actions from the show. It was very fun to do story mode. And the very next year, Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 came out. It changed the game to be cel shaded, and a lot of the characters just look weird. I don't know. They don't look right. It has a horrible story mode. And even worse, the gameplay was barely changed. So combat still feels nearly as stiff. The only difference now is that you can do a beam attack without having to do a bunch of punching and kicking first. Big whoop though, really. And so the characters look weird. At least the music is still good. And the voices are correct, which is why it's so low on the list. But when Dragon Ball Z Budokai HD came out, it had 1 and 3, and it left out number 2. The reason why is because 2 had a terrible story and weird graphics. There's not much more to say about it than that. The 8th game on my list is going to be one that a lot of people are going to disagree with me with. But Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 1, to me, was a really bad game. Spoiler alert for my good Dragon Ball Z list, the other ones are much better. So the series definitely learns from its mistakes, and I'm glad for that. But the first game is really bad. The music, I remember it being from the Budokai series, but it loops really bad and doesn't sound good because of it. The opening cutscene is a monstrosity to look at. All the characters are way too buff and just they look like shiny plastic toys. The in-game graphics are actually really good, except for the models are pretty bad. I remember Vegeta in his Saiyan armor when he first lands on Earth looking about as big and swole as Broly, and I was like, no, he's supposed to be a little skinny dude. That's part of the point. But the gameplay is unfortunately what suffers the most, and which is what gets the most improvements in the Tenkaichi series. You have to lock on to your opponent, and so a lot of the match is going to be you looking around confused because you don't know where your enemy is, and your enemy is just going to be spamming their super and ultimate moves on you, and you can't even so much as lock in on them. And I remember the best way to win any match was the least fun way, especially during the missions that said survive for a minute or whatever, was just to keep on doing Kamehameha, Kamehameha. It was so boring. So the gameplay was boring, and the character models were bad. The music was bad. And this was the first game that had the Tenkaichi way of telling the story, which was basically just the characters standing perfectly still and breathing, which was pretty awkward looking. Like, this is supposed to be an action cartoon. But, yeah, I am so glad that the Tenkaichi series got better after the first one. So, by all technicality, the next one on my list is not a Dragon Ball Z game, but it is called Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. And in Japan, it is just called Dragon Ball Final Bout. But I'm still going to say that it counts. So, Dragon Ball GT Final Bout is one of those games that has not aged well.
Alright, let's fight!
Playtime is over. I will send you to heaven immediately.
The 3D looked decent. Never looked great, but it looked decent back then. Now it looks like total ass. But what is so weird about the game is the mixed media. And what I mean by that is when you are on the character select screen and you select a character, they have one voice, but when you have them use an attack in game, they have their Japanese voice. So that's a confusing thing right away. And I remember the controls are just really bad. I never even could figure out how to go Super Saiyan or how to launch a Kamehameha. The most I could ever do was punch and kick and do regular fireballs. And if I could manage to do a Kamehameha, I could never get a beam struggle. And I know that those are in the game, and I've seen them. And I'm not the worst fighting game player in the world, I can usually handle a story mode for a fighting game. But for this game, I couldn't do anything because the controls are just so bad, and I don't recall the music much, but I don't think it was very good. I could be completely wrong about that, though, so I won't say anything. And this was, I guess, before the Funimation voice actors took over, but it's so jarring to hear the funny voices, and some of them are okay, but they just don't fit with what we associate with the characters anymore. The biggest fault of this game is just how hard it is to actually pull anything off in the game, like the special moves or the transformations or anything like that. Speaking of not fun fighting games, we've got the next game on the list, and I really don't like this one. This is the point in the list where the games are starting to get really bad now. We've got Ultimate Battle 22. Whoa, I don't like this game at all. The graphics are good, sort of. But everything else, oh my god, I couldn't do anything in this game. The fighting is just completely miserable. The biggest compliment I can give this game is it has a decent roster of characters, but it's just not playable. I remember rounds being over before they even started. I would launch a few punches and it would be like, "You're dead." I'm like, what? How did I die already? I barely even started. And that would be over and over again. I actually bought this game on PlayStation. I sold it to GameStop within a day. Oh, I really did not like it. The best part of the game has to be the opening cutscene. That's pretty bad when that's the best part of your game. Do you remember the ugly models I mentioned at the opening of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi had? Someone had the idea to make an entire game look as bad as that. Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z, which first of all is a terrible name, is not only hideous, but is also not fun. The camera's bad, the controls suck, and it seems like an unfocused mess. Not to mention a bad story. I mean, really, the only thing good for this one is the anime cutscenes, which look pretty good. You know, they look like the show. But oh boy, this one's not good. It's not good. Okay, now the next game in the series may look visually halfway okay, but this one should be a no-brainer for why it's bad. Dragon Ball Z for Connect. I just can't imagine anyone past the age of 10 wanting to flail their arms around like an idiot just to play a game. This is one of the worst ideas for Connect. And okay, sure, it's cool to be able to do the motion for a Kamehameha and have it happen, but you look like a jackass just playing this game, and you feel even dumber.
Become a Super Saiyan. Play Dragon Ball Z like you've never played it before. Dragon Ball Z.
Plus, the first person perspective looks really awkward and just kind of looks like a bunch of arms and legs flailing about everywhere. Yeah. This was just a really stupid, dumb idea.
Okay, that does it. You can never defeat me, Frieza! Oh yeah!
Yeah, take that, you son of a bitch. Punch right in your balls. You know what? Kamehameha! Now we're getting into the games that are the nitty-gritty shitty. The top 3. So, our third worst Dragon Ball game of all time is Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu, Game Boy Advance. It looks like a flaming bag of dog shit, and it plays even worse. All the characters just... I don't know what to say. Their proportions are bad, the animations are bad, the AI is bad, the combos are bad, the music is okay. And that's the only compliment I can say for this game. It's on Game Boy Advance, so everything is just poor, you know. Game Boy... Now, don't get me wrong, Game Boy Advance has some of my favorite games of all time, but this is not among them. It basically... what it feels like is some generic fighter that they made that they had no idea what they were going for, and then they just slapped Dragon Ball Z characters on top of it and called it a day. Speaking of slapping Dragon Ball characters on something and calling it a day, we move to the number 2 slot, which is Dragon Ball Evolution for PSP. Now, Dragon Ball Evolution is something that I don't even have to talk about. Everyone knows it's a terrible movie that doesn't represent the franchise one bit, and is not only that, but is also just a bad movie, even aside from the show. But what's weird about this game is it is literally just Dragon Ball Shin Budokai, and they just made the character models look like from Dragon Ball Evolution instead. To kind of say something like Hank Hill, you're not making Dragon Ball Evolution any better, you're just making Dragon Ball Z worse. The sad part is, the game probably has pretty good controls, I'm not gonna lie. I never played this game, nor do I ever intend to. But I've seen the gameplay. It looks exactly like Dragon Ball Z Shin Budokai with replaced character models, and it's from the same team, so that's all it is. And I don't know why they would think anyone would actually buy this. I really don't know what they were thinking. And it has story mode. It's the story of this horrible movie that everyone hated. Really, the reason it's so high up on the list is simply because it's a Dragon Ball Evolution game. Just have to say that out loud again. A Dragon Ball Evolution video game. Leave in the comments if you've never even heard of this before. And now on to our number 1 spot. What could be worse than a Dragon Ball Evolution game? I'll tell you what's worse. Dragon Ball Z Sagas. I played this game and I thought, oh, it's going to be like Dragon Ball Z Budokai. It's going to be fun, but a little bit different. I had no idea what to expect. And then I started playing it. The characters are ugly. They're recognizable at least, but they're ugly. And the combat is terrible. It's I don't know what you would call this genre of game besides crap. Everything is bad. The combo system is terrible. Everything looks and feels wrong. The frame rate is bad. When you fly, you can only fly to the highest level that you jump. What the fuck is that? You're supposed to, it's Dragon Ball Z. The characters can fly around the planet, and they can even fly out into space on some of the characters. Not all of them can breathe in space, but point is, they can free fly. They can teleport. They have so many powers. This feels like another game where they just put the characters of Dragon Ball on another crappy game that they made that wasn't finished and just called it a day. Nothing is right about this. The boss fights are bad. The levels are bad. The attacks are terrible, and all the characters feel the same. To try to make up for it, they include clips from the show. The clips from the show are the only reason to watch. And with the show being on DVD and Blu-ray and everything else you can imagine, they're not worth it. The clips don't make the game worth it. I absolutely do not implore you or to buy this game or you download it, or you shouldn't ever play this game. It's a bad Dragon Ball Z game, and it's just a bad game, period. It has to be the worst Dragon Ball Z game. If you've got a worse one than this, let me know, and I will cry myself to sleep when I see it, because this is tremendously bad. So that's been my list of the top 10 worst Dragon Ball Z games. Did you agree with my list? Or did you think that I had the order wrong? Or did I leave out something that was even worse? Comment and subscribe. Have a good day, and make sure to watch when I make the top 10 best Dragon Ball Z games soon.
Now, the console game adaptations of Dragon Ball Z don't exactly have a great history, but I was still really excited when I heard that a new action-adventure game was out with the license. Oh, I wish I had a time machine so I could show my younger self the errors of my ways.
They couldn't even give me that! A superpowered character to blast through every fight in the game with ease would have been the only amount of fun this game could have given me! Every opportunity it had to be worth a damn, it screwed it up!